All right, this is the brand new Nike GT Cut Cross. This is the third Nike GT Cut to come out in, I think, as many months. And frankly, I'm exhausted. Let's get into them. Now the GT Cut Cross in the uppers looks a whole lot like the GT Cut Academy, except it just has a lot more paneling on the top of it versus the stitching that you saw in the Academy, which honestly I like. It does, you know, do a lot better with dragging or sliding. You look at the upper durability test on these things, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Yeah, the burr does make it through this top layer, but it does not get into the underside. So, I mean, you know, you do actually get a little bit of rubber here that comes up over the uppers. So in terms of dragging or sliding across the GT Cut line, these are probably one of the better ones. Just get ready for them to look pretty weird if you're using them on outdoor courts. But throughout the rest of the uppers, you actually do get some stitching here throughout the lace line. It is reinforced. The tongue is nice and padded. You get this TPU paneling here along the lateral side of the shoe. You know, there is a lot of things to like about that. However, you look at this on the breathability test, these things heated up 133.8 degrees, which is pretty different than what we usually see on Nike shoes. Usually Nike basketball shoes are pretty darn good at handling heat. Now, if you look at this thing on the breathability mapping, really fog not getting out of a lot of places besides around the tongue. And when I was doing the breathability test, what I'm doing now is I'm taking the thermometer and I'm going on the top of the shoe as I have the heat gun in there. You can kind of see where all the heat's escaping. Not much heat was escaping from anywhere here. A lot of it was getting trapped in the padding and then, you know, under that paneling here, which was kind of just trapping all that heat in there. And that's why these things were heating up more. Yeah, you get a little bit more containment out of them, but you're also going to get a little bit more heating. And like I said, I mean, I do like it that, you know, the Nike swoosh, you do get some stitching here across the heel counter. You know, is that window dressing or not? I mean, I think that does something because you got stitched elements that are coming kind of in this X pattern, you know, across the lateral ankle, lateral heel, I should say. So that is nice. You know, I do like that. In terms of heel slippage on these, it was pretty mild to moderate. Once this started breaking in because of the midsole foam, which you'll see in a second, you do start to, you know, form into the shoe a lot better. But getting into the reason why these shoes really are just exhausting me is the midsole teardown. Now, I was told once by a shoe reviewer that I very much respect, Drew Whitcomb, to never trust a website's description of the shoes. And that's why a lot of the times I still cut open shoes that I don't think really changed much in the midsole, still cut them open, like, you know, from the Jordan 38 to the 38 low and that stuff. A lot of times I'll find something, and the GT Cut Cross is no different. In the description, it says that there is dual density foam in there. Now there's dual density foam in the GT Cut Academy, right? You get the Renew and the Lunarlon type foam, whereas in this one, it just looks like straight Phylon. I mean, I took x-rays of it. You can see the Zoom Air unit, how it's more longitudinally oriented in there. I don't see any dual density foam. I looked around the shoe. I cut it, you know, in half, you know, length and width wise. Really nothing. There's no shank on these things. You do have a little bit more stiff rubber here, right in the middle of the shoe that almost kind of acts like a shank. It actually is decently stiff right in the rear foot, like right where the rear foot meets the midfoot. But I mean, it is still flexible. You can still bend it pretty easily, but I mean, that's okay. Maybe they're considering that foam. I mean, it does feels like rubber, right? It just feels like hard rubber there. So I'm not sure, but it just does look like it's, you know, Phylon all the way through and then a longitudinal Zoom Air unit in the forefoot. Still no shank on these. This would have been a perfect opportunity to put a shank just because these are a little bit more expensive than the Academies, but you do get the longitudinal zoom, so that is going to protect that foam a little bit more in the midfoot. And because, like I said, this rubber is pretty darn stiff under here, this will act like a pretty decent load share device for a while. How that acts after 3 months remains to be seen. Does that start breaking down with the rest of the rubber in the shoe, or does that hold together a little bit better because it's a little bit thicker? You know, we'll see in 3 months when people are wearing them more often. Now, if you look at this thing on the bounce height test, 32 centimeters in the rear foot, 37 in the forefoot. You look at the GT Cut Academy, and that was 35.5 in the rear foot. That shows you the difference between that foam setup and this foam setup. Even with the Zoom Air, you know, when you've got that dense Phylon over top of it, it's going to deaden a lot of the rebound of that Zoom Air, you know, on the bottom of the shoe. So you kind of see what those, you know, different foams do in a pretty similar setup shoe. And getting into the outsole tread, once again, pretty similar to the GT Cut Academy. I do like this outsole tread pattern, these razored mountain peak patterns. You look at it on the viewing box, it just moves all together, but also, you know, the individual tread lines are moving too. It almost moves like a wave. It's really interesting on the viewing box, and it also just feels good underfoot. I really do like the more tactile sensation of this type of tread pattern, as long as you keep it on indoors. This is XDR rubber. I got the XDR version of this shoe, and still on the outsole durability test on this 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, still got a millimeter of damage, even though the durometer is pretty high on this. Remember, just thin lines of tread. There's just not a lot to share that friction, right? It's just one little line of tread, so there's not much protecting it. So even with the XDR on these, on outdoor courts, they're still gonna start to meld together, and you're still gonna lose all the best parts of the shoe. You look at it on the grip test RAM, speaking of, these things, they slipped at 41 degrees, which I thought was pretty good. Honestly, initial grip on these is really outstanding. They do go through a dusting phase, just like the Academy and just like the GT Cut 3, so you do have to, wipe them down. But if you keep them wiped, just a quick palm wipe, it's not that big of a deal. They do just have that very, very tactile sensation underfoot, which is really nice. I mean, honestly, that's, I think, the best part of the entire GT Cut line is the way the outsole tread is oriented. And speaking of that, if you look at the speed ratio of these, coming at a 2.53, most of that is because the shoe, it isn't super heavy. And, honestly, I think that's where they belong. Like I said, when the shoe is new, this really, more thick, harder rubber here where the shank should be, that does give a nice feeling. The shoe does feel like it's snapping, right? That is pretty nice. And the longitudinal Zoom Air, I do like it because you're getting just a little bit more of your foot interacting with the Zoom, right? It's going right under the meatiest part of your foot, which I like. Yeah, you don't feel the Zoom Air as much, but I feel like it might do maybe just a little bit more. Maybe that's minutia, I don't know. But like I said, these definitely feel a little bit more snappy. The problem I have is if it is just thicker rubber, is that gonna start to wear down over time? I actually might get another pair of these just to wear these over 3-4 months and to see, because I'm so curious as to, does this harder rubber, can it replace more plastic? I don't think, I think it's gonna start to wear down, but it would be interesting if it doesn't. And getting into the fit of the GT Cut Cross, and like I said, this is the EP version, the XDR version, which a lot of times is a little bit wider than the traditional. Now these ones were exactly the same as the GT Cut Academy I had in the standard US sizing. They had a 10-degree inflare, which is pretty good. That thing curves in pretty decent. And then it came in at 29 centimeters length and then just 9 centimeters in width. Now, it does break in. I noticed the first time I was in them, I was cramping pretty darn good, mostly from the inflare of the shoe. I was just cramping right there on the outside of my foot and the lateral side where my styloid is. But they did break in nicely the second and third time I had them on foot. Actually, they did not feel bad. So they do break in, but if you're gonna get the EP or the XDR version of the shoe, you're getting it for the rubber to last a little bit longer, not necessarily for fit. Now, in terms of foot types, narrow, medium foot, and then just go true to size. A 2E, I'd probably just try to go up 1/2 size on these, just because heel slippage concerns, you can go up a size on these, but like I said, you might start coming out of the shoe a little bit. A 4E, I think, again, is a mismatch on these. In terms of the snake bitten foot, you can fit a low profile orthotic in these. That's nice. That's also going to help stress shield the shoe and help, that rubber piece last a little bit longer, give the shoe a little bit more snap for longer. It's going to keep it fast for longer. I wouldn't be putting anything bulky in these things. You're going to start lifting out of the shoe, so it's better be pretty darn low profile. I think if you can do that, then I think these things are good for most things. In terms of ankle sprainers, these things do have actually a pretty chunky flange on here, so that is nice. Remember, it is pretty soft though, so the inflare of the shoe, it kind of cancels it out a little bit. I do think in terms of the third iteration, the GT Cut, or like the GT Cut 3 line, these are probably the most stable out of all of them. They're still not the greatest things on planet Earth for a sprainer though. And looking at the performance of the GT Cut Cross, I know I've talked about this in other videos that I've recorded today, but I actually did start taking basketball lessons. I'm starting them twice a week. I'm on my second week, and for some reason, my shoulder blades are just on fire right now. It's interesting how, when I watch myself play, I'm watching the same video you are. I know I don't look great out there, but it's interesting though when you actually get a professional coach looking at, your shot, your footwork, just how much you're doing wrong. So that has been interesting, and it has allowed me to put these shoes through a lot of more unique and more stressful situations on court. So I actually feel like the reviews, at least in my mind, my idea of the shoe and the performance review of the shoe, like that performance portion of the review, honestly is getting better and better because I'm just putting them through more and more stress, which I think is great for the channel. So I know I asked this in another video, but if you do want to see a full video of kind of like start of the summer to the end of the summer, the basketball lessons, let me know in the comments down below. If you're not interested, let me know too. Love to know either way. You're not gonna hurt my feelings either way. But in terms of the performance of these, like I said, they did feel very, very snappy, and the traction on them and the feel through them, I did like, because a lot of times with Zoom Air, right, there's air between you and the ground, and then, you know, the urethane, you know, Zoom pouch over top of it. So, you know, the feel isn't tremendous. You can get around that in a few ways, like the Sabrina 2 with the super thin Zoom Air unit, where you really still feel the ground. It actually feels great. These ones with longitudinal zoom, you know, the ball of your foot, right, your head of your first metatarsal can still feel the ground, right? That zoom is interacting more with the arch of your foot, right, and underneath it, you know, the central portion of the ball of your foot. So your first and fifth are still feeling the ground. I really liked that from these, especially because when I was planting pretty hard, I could really get a nice kind of tactile feel. These things did have a nice bit of spring to them too. I mean, these things did pop up off the ground pretty nicely, and even with the jumpers I've been going through, really didn't feel much on these. On indoor courts, on outdoor courts, you start to feel it. But I did notice you keep them on indoor courts, they honestly, they play pretty well. The thing that I have, the square that I have trouble circling is the Academies are cheaper than these are, and I think they do a lot of the same things, and the foam feels just a little bit nicer on those because it, you know, I mean, I like Renew foam. That's just personal for me. These definitely feel a little bit more stable because dense Phylon is dense Phylon, right? It's not going to buckle as much, you know, with the flange on these things. There's just a little bit, these just are a little bit more stout, whereas the Academies, a little bit more nimble, a little bit more a feeling of forgiveness underfoot, and then the GT Cut 3 a little bit faster. Honestly, I would say just for me, because I like stability, I liked these, the crosses a little bit more in terms of stability. I like the Academy more overall just because of the price difference, and I like the GT Cut 3 at the number 3 spot, to be honest. So I think it just depends. Do you want more stability out of these? Do you want that little bit more soft, a little bit more, you know, pillowy cushion feeling of the Academy, you know, if you're comparing the two of those shoes? So honestly, I just wish there was a shank in these things, and I think then you really would have completed the line of shoes, right? You could have kind of, you know, had a pretty solid lineup of the cuts. It's interesting though, they chose the GT Cut 3 to really branch off and make all these different shoes from. I would love to talk to one of the designers there to see kind of where that decision was made, why that decision was made, and kind of the decision between the iterations of the shoe. Why does the Academy, you know, have the dual density foam? Why does this have just the Phylon, even though it says there's dual density foam in there? I'd love to talk to someone about it. If you are a Nike and a designer that watch this channel and you want to do an interview, I'd love to have you on, just because I do think this line of shoes is just so fascinating, kind of where they went from the drop-ins of the 1 and the 2 to kind of the 3 different versions of a very similar shoe in the 3. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you don't see what I'm talking about with the GT Cut 3 and why I think that one kind of is the 3rd best shoe in the line, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.